right. I've heard enough. Dan, when my head-to-head league, when players are not tough anymore, when tired of the whining. I should have had the Arnold Schwarzenegger kindergarten cop soundboard queued up to start this show so that I could hit you all with a stop whining. You eat other people's lunches? Stop it. Do you guys, okay, I know I'm dating myself a little bit, but in high school, there was, and it's still out there somewhere, they're still floating around. I don't know if anybody still uses them. Arnold Schwarzenegger soundboards became a thing on the internet, like around the year 1999, the year 2000, something like that. Right near the end of my high school experience. And we had just the time of our lives. They had crank calls that were being done with these soundboards. Who is your daddy and what does he do? You son of a... Anyway, stop whining is basically where I'm at with all of you guys right now who are complaining about rest days at the end of the season. It is now built in. It's baked into the season. There are going to be end of year rest days, and I don't want to hear about it. That's not to say that we can't try to fix fantasy leagues around these changes. But this was happening even before COVID, not to this extent. COVID kind of gave teams this opening to just be like, yeah, so-and-so, they're just out for a while. But guys, gals, all of you, this is baked in. Guys are not going to play, most of the players in the NBA are not going to play all 82 games. Most of these guys are not trying to play all 82 games. If you can isolate the dudes that do, more power to you. If you can find the guys that play 75 games, you have a massive advantage over your league. But forget that for a minute. The complaints that I'm mostly hearing, and I'll admit, I am whining a little bit about what the Utah Jazz did this season. To me, that was newer and more obnoxious. You know, they let John Collins play for like a month and then on and off for like 2 months and then just not at all. You can't rest your gut. I mean, you can, obviously, because they got away with it. But shutting down your guys for half the season in a tanking year is a new brand of crap. So that's annoying. Yes, I will grant you that one. But the other stuff, the Boston Celtics giving most of their regulars, every other game off down the stretch. Not new. They did that the year before. They want their guys to be healthy going into the playoffs. Yes, a few of them still had pretty good numbers this year. You know, Tatum still got to 70-ish games, and Derek White got into the mid-70s. But Drew Holiday missed a ton of games, and we knew Porzingis was going to miss a ton of games, and Horford missed a ton of games, and Jaylen Brown missed a ton of games. These things were not surprises. And you can go through the teams in the NBA and like point at each one of them and find the stuff. And we're going to kind of do that to some degree in just a minute. First, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all sports betting action. Baseball season's in full swing. We got NBA and NHL playoffs to bet on right now, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds on all of those games, news, scores, and even live betting while the game is being played. And, well, first of all, what do you got in the NBA tonight? You want to see what the games are going down right now? It's Friday. Boston's in Orlando. Celtics favored by about 3.5 on the road. Milwaukee, 5.5-point home favorites over Indiana. Minnesota, 3.5-point home favorites over the Lakers. That is, I think there's an expectation that Minnie takes that game at home. 207.5 the total. You know me, I start to lean towards unders as these series go on, and the numbers are dropping. Like a boulder, those numbers are falling. If you want to get in on any of that, head over to Bet Online today. But if you don't, or in between games or whatever, before they start, you can visit the Bet Online casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker, a live casino, slot games, upwards of 15 different types of blackjack alone. Bet Online, the game starts here. Oh, hell yeah. Let's hang out with our boys over at Bet Online. So let's just look at the league, the teams in the NBA real fast. Cavaliers, what did they do with their guys down the stretch? They had a massive advantage over everybody. Donovan Mitchell did, by the way, get to, I think, 70, 71 games this year. 71, was it, the final number? Darius Garland was largely healthy this year. He played in low 70s in games. But yeah, they got a game or two off down the stretch. This is just how it is. Celtics did it. Knicks, I mean, they had a guy that was missing, but like they were fighting. Knicks, Pacers, Bucks, Pistons, these teams were all mostly fighting for playoff spot. If guys were out for them, it was because they needed to be out. Western Conference, same thing. Thunder rested a few of their guys down the stretch. Rockets gave their guys some off days. Lakers did it on back-to-backs, even though they were fighting for playoff seeding. Nuggets had guys getting rest days down the stretch. This is baked in. Yes, the teams at the very bottom are going to be more obnoxious. The Jazz setting a new precedent for terrible, because they actually could have been an okay team if they played their guys this year, and they just didn't from like the middle of November on. Pelicans shut everybody down with 2 or 3 weeks to go. Spurs started to shut people down with a couple weeks to go. Not Chris Paul. He played in every goddamn game this year. Wizards, believe it or not, they had very few guys to shut down. Jordan Poole got the plug pulled kind of near the end of the season. Hornets, that was a mess. Sixers, once that season was cooked, then they started shutting everybody down with a month to go. And the Nets, like the Jazz, but in a more, almost an equally obnoxious way, the Nets played everybody, gave most of their regulars back-to-backs off, and then played everybody like 26 minutes a game after that. Raptors, same thing. They accidentally were winning too many games, so they had to rest their guys every other game, and they rotated which dudes were resting. This is baked into the equation. And we can look towards next year and say, okay, well, who do we think is going to be tanking next year? I would assume the Wizards are still going to be bad. The Hornets might still be bad. The Nets might still be bad. The Raptors might try to be a little bit better. I don't know. We'll see. Jazz, is it finally time to start trying to win? We're 3 years of tank in a row. At some point, they got to try. Pels will probably try. Spurs, Blazers, Suns. Are the Suns going to blow it up? Like, I don't know. The teams out west, there might be one team in the Western Conference that tries to lose this coming year. The point is not necessarily to emphasize how prevalent or not prevalent it is that teams are tanking or resting guys or whatever, but instead to say, this is just a thing now. So just get used to it. Stop complaining about it and deal with it in whatever way makes the most sense. I'm here to tell you there are a few ways that make sense. Way number one, which I know you guys are not going to do, is play Roto. Come join me on the magical land of Roto. I was in 10 cash leagues this last year. 8 of them were Roto leagues. I did not play in a Yahoo Public Prize head-to-head league because I hate fab overnight ads for head-to-head when so many guys are getting ruled out at the last second. I think that's an insane way to try to play. I know that's how the public leagues are set up because they want to try to give everybody an opportunity to get players, but it's stupid. Making moves, setting the moves the night before you go to sleep, and then, with a month to go in the season, anybody could get ruled out. You're just like not going to have a full lineup. So that's dumb. Play in a head-to-head league where you can make roster moves day of. Should I have put that on the screen? Probably. That should have been a slide, but whatever. Today's just going to be a show where you guys watch me wipe my nose because the allergies are back in full swing here as the temperature changes in LA. And what else am I doing besides wiping my nose? Oh, I'm yelling at you about what you can do to deal with it. So deal with it. Thing number one is play in head-to-head leagues that have day of roster moves. Okay, that solves one small part of the equation. If you can make a move the day of, you can wait until 15 minutes before tip, and then you can rotate guys in or out based on who's hurt and streaming schedule and whatever else you need to do. Thing number 2 you should do is to make sure that you have IL Plus available in your head-to-head leagues, and preferably multiple. Or if you wanted to, and maybe this is the way to do it, have one traditional IL slot for someone who's been out for a while, and have one IL slot for someone who is, a game time call during your playoffs and then gets ruled out at the last second. I think I might actually be having a bloody nose while live on a podcast. We're going to push through if we can, and if not, you'll see a weird jump cut where I abandon ship to go deal with the fact that I'm paying off over here. So that's thing number 2. You want to have IL slots. How many is up for debate? I'm in one league. Actually, both of my head-to-head leagues only have one, which is atrocious. For some reason, the other teams in those leagues really like the idea that you might have to drop a decent player if you have too many injuries, which seems stupid to me. Like, why would, if you have 2 injured guys, you just lose? That's nuts. I think 2 is probably the magic number. 3 is workable. I wouldn't do 3 IL plus slots because there's too much gaming the system. With IL plus, it does solve a little bit of that, the game time decision call. But what my hope would be is that the IL plus slot could be used for somebody who's listed as out with an O on Yahoo as opposed to a game time call. Because, those guys might get ruled in. There are a lot of guys that get listed as game time decisions, even if they're better than 50-50. I think LeBron was technically a game time call for 60 of his games this year, but he played in almost all of them. Teams are keeping guys on the injury report in case they want to give them a rest day, then they can just rule them out. Tired, but whatever, they had an injury that was listed the day before, so they're not going to get any kind of weird fine for it. So as teams loophole the player participation rules, it's trickling down to what we can and can't do in a fantasy league. And if you want people to game your system with an IL plus slot, that's sort of how that ends up happening. So my hope would be, and I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon, that IL plus slots would be used for players that are actually listed as out, but are not IL eligible yet. So my recommendation then is having a traditional IL slot for someone that's been out a while, have an IL plus slot for someone who gets ruled out or whatever, it might get ruled out, that kind of thing. And yes, teams can still take advantage of it if they're a little bit healthier, but it does give you a little more wiggle room to withstand some of the injury slots. So thing number 2, make sure your injured slots fit your league build, whatever that might be. If it's 3 bench slots and 1 IL and 1 IL plus, or 4 bench slots, an IL and an IL plus, something along those lines. I know Yahoo's leagues have 3 injured slots, which they'll get used. You're going to have a time during the year where you have 3 guys out, but so will other teams. So, do you need to go to all 3? I don't know. It sort of lengthens rosters a little bit, and I think I'm maybe a little bit more inclined to go with 2. But frankly, you could go as high as you want, and I don't really care. Just so that, for traditional IL slots, you can go to 12. Stash as many hurt guys as you want. They're not helping you. And to bring them off IL, you're going to have to drop somebody. So it's not like you can game the system that way. So fine. Traditional IL slots, you can go 2, 3, 4. I don't care. But only one, go 1 IL plus is my recommendation, because you have too many of those. Teams that are healthy can just throw game time call guys in there that aren't playing that night, and they can end up with 2 extra players for a couple of days during the week. I'm not a huge fan of that. Thing number 3 is a thing we've talked about every year for the last 3-4 seasons in a row, and that is you must be in a head-to-head league that ends the season 3 weeks early or more. I personally have settled on 3, but given everything we've seen with tanking lately, you could go as early as the All-Star break, and you'd still be lopping off more silly-ish season. Still, if you go too early, you kind of cut your regular season down to the nubs. And if anybody on your team gets hurt, like you basically lose any time you might have to make a comeback from a couple of injured weeks, which that's rough. So maybe like 19 regular season weeks, 3 playoff weeks, and you cut off basically the last 3, something like that. I forget exactly how many weeks it was, but ending your season 3 weeks early, I believe, is not a perfect solution and not a magic number by any account, but it does kind of make sense. Because those last 3 weeks is when you saw the teams that were competing, or at least trying to compete, then they realized they weren't going to get there and they started kind of pulling the plug on guys. And Toronto's stuff was like with 4 weeks left, and New Orleans stuff was with about 2 weeks left. And so these teams that were a little more fringy, not that the Raptors ever really wanted to be super competitive this year, but like those are the 2 teams that pop into mind. Spurs started to get a little wonky with a couple weeks to go. Blazers a couple weeks to go. Yes, there were teams that went wonky earlier, like the Jazz, the Nets, the Sixers, the Hornets. But like you'd have to cut off half the season to deal with whatever was going on in Philly, Brooklyn, and Utah. You're not going to fix all 30 teams. My computer just kicked it into high gear in the background. I don't know what's happening now. Someone hacked my machine and is mining Bitcoin while I try to record a podcast. So you're never going to fix all 30 teams. It's just not going to happen. You can't end your season early enough for that to be the case. But if we can find a way to fix about 90%, I think that works, and that's ending your season about 3 weeks early. So that's thing number 3, is make sure your season ends at the right time. I'll note, by the way, that in Roto, you don't have to do any of these things. I'm not saying you have to abandon ship on head-to-head, because I'm going to play in both, and I understand that there's that sort of competition element to it where you guys like to have the week-to-week. You guys like the sphincter puckering anxiety of a head-to-head playoff battle. But I will say, just try it out. You know, if you're going to play out an entire season of fantasy basketball and you're going to listen to a podcast like mine, that means that you're sort of tuned in enough where, like, you could handle a Roto season. There isn't that big up and down swing. You don't have the adrenaline surges every Sunday, but you just you tweak it, you play it, you move your guys around, the strategy's there. You just have to be ready for the long haul without the sort of periodic gratification you get in head-to-head. You get the gratification in Roto when you win at the end. And it's going to be fair when you get there. And you're like, oh, that was fair. It didn't have as many highs and lows, but it was fair. So that'll always be number 1. Try Roto. So again, the 3 things we've covered so far: try to join a league that has day of roster moves for head-to-head. Make sure you're in a league that has multiple IL slots and 1 IL plus slot. End your season early to avoid the 3, 4, 5 additional teams that pull the plug with 2 to 3 weeks to go, so that you're only, during the regular season, dealing with the hard tanking teams, the bull you-know-what that you get out of this year, Utah, and a little bit Brooklyn. Again, you're not going to fix them all. And like that sort of connects to draft with a little more caution than I've suggested in the past. So number 4 on today's list, and again, I know I'm just yelling at you, no graphics on today's show. Sorry, it's an off season. I'm not going to have graphics every day. Is draft with caution. And that's a thing that actually has changed a little bit over the last half decade. I don't remember a time before 2019, 2018, when a team was tanking so hard that they had a decent roster and just didn't let those guys play the way that we saw from specifically the Jazz this year. Because, like, teams have tanked since the dawn of time. Teams have been tanking for 40, 50 years. But usually, they're just bad. And bad teams lose. The Wizards are a great example of that. They played their guys. They lost anyway. They just sucked. It didn't matter who they played. They were bad. The Pelicans played the guys that were healthy on that team. They were just bad. The Hornets weren't healthy at all. Brooklyn played their guys for a while, realized, we're like the 10 seed. We're going to screw this up. And then they started tanking, halfway through the year. Utah, almost right out of the chute, was like, oh, crap. When they played a lineup with Colin Sexton, John Collins, Walker Kessler, Jordan Clarkson, like the list goes on and on for talking about who could have played for Utah. They were accidentally winning ball games, and they've done it for like 3 years running now. Lauri Markkanen. Crap, forgot about Lauri Markkanen. How many games did these guys play? John Collins played 40, Kessler 58, Markkanen 47. Where was Jordan Clarkson in all of this? 37. Unbelievable. Colin Sexton at least got to 63. At least, I say. Only missed 20 games, basically. Keontae George only played 67. Utah didn't let anybody play this year. That's a relatively new phenomenon where a team has like multiple. I would say Walker Kessler could someday be an all-star if teams valued defense and rebounding. Maybe it won't actually happen. Lauri Markkanen, when he's on, that's all-star level. John Collins, better than average basketball player. Colin Sexton, at least average. Like, this team is I don't say legitimately good team, but if they played their guys all year and they played Collins, Kessler, Markkanen, Sexton, Clarkson, Keontae, like if they gave these guys legitimate minutes for 75 games, they're probably still not making the play-in, but they wouldn't have been a whole lot worse than the Blazers at 10 games under 500 or the Spurs at 14 games under. They probably would have been right there with San Antonio or like around a 30-win team. How many games did the Jazz win this year? 17. I believe that they tanked out at least 13, probably more like 15 or 16 games by just saying, sorry, vets, you guys don't get to play. And so for our purposes, that means we got to be a little bit more careful with what we do on draft night. And it's not super straightforward either. Because a team like Utah, coming into the year, it wasn't super clear. I want to say it wasn't like, I guess it was like sort of obvious, but it wasn't hyper obvious that they were going to be tanking this hard. Because the Jazz won 31 games last year. They weren't good, but they were fine. Year before that, Jazz won 37 games while they were kind of half tanking. And the roster didn't change that much. So it was like, are they going to half tank again? Nope. Finally, they were like, it's Cooper Flag time. And so that's a problem with a team like Utah. You might take away from this year, we got to avoid the Jazz at all costs. But they might go into next season and say, look, we got the pieces to be a mid-30s win team again. Should we do it? I don't know. Still, someone like a John Collins is an expiring contract. I think, what's Jordan Clarkson? Didn't he re-sign a new contract with them recently? Was it a 2-year deal? Yes. Jordan Clarkson is an expiring $14 million contract. John Collins is an expiring like 20. So they like Utah, it looks like they should tank again. I don't know that they will. So point is, we'll reconvene on this type of topic in August or hell, even July after free agency and say, okay, who's on what team right now? And what do we know about what that means they're going to do? And what I think you need to watch out for are teams with veterans you were considering drafting that could be an okay team but want to tank. So the Nets are the one that jumps out to me. They're just kind of starting their hard tank. They unloaded all their stars. Everybody's gone. And they accidentally won some games the first half of this year and then realized that that wasn't going to work. So if you're looking at next season and you're looking at, they don't have many veterans on that team, but like a Cam Johnson, hopefully he gets moved. 2 years still on his contract. He may or may not get moved. Be careful with veteran-style players on teams that want to lose. As opposed to a team like the Wizards, where you could be like, all right, well, who's the veteran on that club? Jordan Poole? Does he qualify as a veteran? I guess he's been around a little bit. They played in 68 games this year. The beauty of it was they were so bad anyway that it didn't matter, that it got him to a respectable number of games played. So I'm not saying that you need to avoid all tanking teams in head-to-head leagues. I'm saying you need to try to figure out if there's a tanking team that would be accidentally good or decent or middling or slightly better than mediocre if they played their guys. And I don't know what teams those are going to be right now. We're going to have to wait and see what free agency brings. But Brooklyn is one that jumps out as a maybe. I don't know that anybody in the Western Conference jumps out as a maybe. Literally, the whole damn conference could compete next year. I like if Wemby's healthy, I think the Spurs are going to want to because they got to show him that's the place to be forever. Do the Pels blow it up? Could the Jazz go tank mode again? The Jazz would be a team I'm very worried about. The problem is that, and not a problem, it's sort of a good problem, is if you draft John Collins, we talked about this a couple days ago on the show, he probably gets moved. I don't want Jordan Clarkson. I'm not drafting him anyway. But John Collins, you're like, all right, well, he might only play 40. He might play, 20 of the first 35 games for Utah. But if he gets moved, then someone's going to play him the rest of the way. What about out east? Wizards, they're not going to be good regardless of who plays for them. Could the Hornets be okay if they played their guys? I think they kind of have to. They've been bad for too long. Raptors, are they going to tank one more year? That would be one I'd be a little bit worried about. The Bulls have shown they're unwilling to tank. So maybe it's Brooklyn, Toronto, maybe Utah are the teams I would look at right now and say next year these teams could accidentally win 30 games if they played their guys. So will they? So have a little bit of caution with 5 to 10% of teams in the league. And, what does that mean from a fantasy standpoint? If you were thinking about drafting, I don't know, Cam Johnson. Well, he's not going to go early. No one on these teams. Who the hell's going to go early on these teams? Scotty Barnes maybe is one you'd be a little more cautious about. We faded him last year because I didn't think his stats from 2 seasons ago were real, and it kind of ended up being both. I don't know that I would go too heavy on other Raptors right now. But again, it's April 25th. I reserve the right to come back, look at all of these teams as they are reconstructed after free agency and say, oh, well, this team actually, they're going to compete now, or this team is obviously going to tank. But if a team's going to be bad enough without resting guys, those guys can probably just survive the fray. The Hornets, didn't Miles Bridges play most of the season again? Not that he's a guy that you want to build your team around, but Miles Bridges, was he suspended? Was this the suspension? No, that was last year. When did he miss games this year? I don't even remember. Brandon Miller got hurt, and then everything sort of went to hell at that point. I don't know that this team would be any good. If Mark Williams, LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller, if those guys are all upright, they might accidentally win a couple of ball games, but they should get another decent pick out of it. 19-win team. Third worst. Is it time? Oh, we'll see. So draft with a little bit more caution. That's the 4th thing on our list for how to fix your head-to-head leagues or whatever you want to call the topics of today's show. And I mean, so I didn't write it down, but number 1 was really just stop being surprised by it. And I know I said that jokingly, stop whining at the beginning of the show, but that is arguably the most important one. I said this during the second COVID season. It was in December. That might have been the Omicron wave or some. Thank God that's done. Where I was like, guys, stop bitching about it and let's just use it to our advantage. If everybody else is out there whining and moaning and saying, oh, I'm never going to play fantasy basketball again because nobody plays games anymore. Just figure out how to win at it. You're going to get stuck with some bad luck. It happens. It happens to everybody. And it's not because guys are just soft now or whatever the going rate is. Donovan Mitchell probably cost me a head-to-head league. But he was largely healthy this year, and it wasn't rest games. He came back and he played most of the games down the stretch. He missed 1 week, basically the whole week. He missed like Monday through Saturday, played one game at the end of the week, and it happened to be my semifinal week. It happens. It's another reason I like Roto is that if a guy misses a week in March versus misses a week in November, guess what? That's the same. It doesn't change anything. And you got a games cap. And that, by the way, is the last thing on the list. Consider a games cap for your head-to-head league. You can set it relatively high if you want to allow teams, if they want to stream a little bit, to do so. But instead of, you could do 4 games per slot, or you could do 4 at a lot of them and maybe give an extra one at the utility slots or something like that. Or you could just do a total games and not break it down by roster position. I think you have to be on Fantrax to implement this effectively. I don't know how easy it is to do on Yahoo as a head-to-head commissioner. If they allow it, I think it's relatively complicated. So this is one that I kind of saved till last. The great Josh Lloyd has been doing this for a couple of seasons now in his big leagues that he's running, and it's been generally well received. It replaces a lot of the day-to-day games maximizing streaming that goes on, and instead it emphasizes getting the best available players on your roster and like perfect roster construction. And it's just a very different strategy that instead of emphasizing volume, it emphasizes efficiency. You just need to have like the best 12 guys, which, by the way, plays a lot more like Roto. I know you still get sort of like the semi-highs and lows of winning or losing every Sunday, but a games cap in a head-to-head league does make it a little bit more like Roto. I would also throw out there as sort of like an honorable mention last thing on our list today. If you want to give out some of your prize in head-to-head based on top 2-3 records or something like that and eliminate the playoff bye week, that would be fine for me also. So maybe in that instance, you allow 8 out of 12 teams to make your head-to-head playoffs instead of 6. Nobody gets a first-round bye, but the top 4 teams get some of the pot. Like you take 50% of the pot and you split it among the top 4, something like, 25, 12 and a half, 6 and change and 6 and change, something like that. Third and fourth place get the same amount. I don't know. You get with your league, you figure it out. I think that's kind of a decent idea because then at least if you have a really good first 19 weeks, you do get rewarded for it. Even if you're the first place team, you go into the playoffs in the very first week, half your team rests or gets hurt. At least you've taken something home. So consider that. I know not everybody's going to be a fan of that one because it takes some of the big wallop out of winning your title, but it does, I think, make it a little bit more fair, and it takes a little bit of that edge off. So again, just to recap here at the end, number 1, stop whining. Figure it out. We're big kids. We can do this. 2, day of roster moves. 3, IL slots and an IL plus slot. 4, end your league 3 weeks early. 5, try to isolate the 1 or 2 teams that you know is going to rest their veterans earlier and earlier and earlier because they might accidentally screw up their tank, and probably avoid those 1 or 2 teams. You could also, by the way, throw in maybe don't draft a player who has a 2-game playoff week, but look what happened to Luka. 5? That was 5. 6, consider a games cap. 7, consider end of regular season payouts for your head-to-head league. And those are the ways that you can fix your head-to-head league, which I believe actually isn't broken. I think it's fine. It's been this way for half a decade now. Let's just put on our big boy pants or big girl pants or whatever and figure it out. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Noah and Red Bauer have an amazing show out today on our YouTube page. Make sure to subscribe so you get that. Kingy launches his new show most likely next week. All good things. All good things. See you then.